Last lecture of Dr. Charles Lineweaver. So please, Charles, take the floor.
All right, Marcelo, thank you. So in my previous lectures, I've talked about the origin of life, what, when, where, how, what kind of planets are in the universe, the exoplanets, then habitable zones, the regions of the universe that are presumably more habitable for life. And today I'll be talking about, are we alone? What can life on Earth tell us about life elsewhere? And So I taught a course called Are We Alone at UNSW, University of New South Wales, for about 5 years or so. And I did a survey, like Hervé did a survey of his students. And I did a survey called Are We Alone? And before I show you the results of my class, I thought I'd do a survey here. So there are three possible answers: yes, no, and huh. So, are we alone? Yes. Who says yes, we are alone? All right. Are we alone? No. Who says we're not alone? Okay. And are we alone? Huh. Okay. Very good. So, by the way, very few people said yes, we are alone. And this was the results from before I taught the class. This is what the students said. Now, this is interesting because, like Hervé's results, this is a result that's pretty universal. I've done this in Australia, the US, India, China, and Australia. So, but after the course, now this is a full semester course with influenced by my opinions, this is what happened. So yes, when increased to twice, and I'm very proud of this increase of the huh. From 10 to 20%, I got a huh. And so that's what I'm hoping maybe to provide you with some, huh? What is he talking about? What does this mean? Basically, the problem is, what does this mean, are we alone? Who is we? Half the people in the world, when you ask this question, are we alone? Half the people think we means we human beings. And I think the answer to that is, obviously, we're not alone because there are other life forms on Earth. The Earth is part of the universe, therefore we are not alone. We human beings are definitely not alone. The answer, finished. The other half of the people say, are we the life forms on Earth alone? Are we the life forms on Earth the only life forms in the universe? And there, I would also argue that I don't know what that means. Because people think they know what life is, and I would argue for hours and hours that we do not know what life is. Basically, it's easy to bring up viruses as the primary case of the most abundant organisms on Earth that there's such disagreement among biologists and anybody else about whether they're alive or not. We have a biologist back there who thinks, yes, of course they're alive. And I would say, yes, probably they're alive, but we don't know what alive means, so maybe that answer is not satisfactory. In any case, that was the survey, and you guys fit into this category. Hopefully, at the end of this lecture, you'll be shifted onto this. Anyway, moving along. So the process that we're talking about is the origin of life, and so this turned into this. We've shown this is the two-frame movie that we're trying to figure out whether that has happened elsewhere. And it happened on this wet, rocky planet. Whoops, what did I do there? I turned off. This process happened on this wet, rocky planet. Now, this planet is 4.5 billion years old, and the universe is 13.8 billion years old. So that's about a third. So if here's the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, and here's today, here's where the sun and the earth formed. You can see there's about a third, and here's 2/3. Right? Now, that's an important concept because you can ask the question, how does the age of the Earth compare to the ages of other Earths? I told you there are many, many, many billions and billions of other Earths. That's not something that we can debate very easily anymore because of the statistics of exoplanet detections. However, I showed you this the other day, and that is, here's the distribution of stars. Here's the distribution of other Earths. Here's our Earth and our sun. Here are the older Earths, here are the younger Earths, and you can see there are more older Earths, and the average is about 2 billion years older. So the average of these, so our Earth is about 2 billion years younger than other Earths. All right? That's something that we're pretty sure of. That's what the statistics say. if I'd like to do this again and get some better analysis and get a better idea of the star formation history of the universe, and then this number might change a little bit, but not substantially. That result we are going to have to live with. Okay, so if life has emerged on Earth, it has had 2 billion. If life has emerged on other Earths, it has had about 2 billion years longer to evolve than we have had. All right, so 100 billion older Earths in our galaxy, 100 billion trillion in the universe. These are big numbers. It makes the question, are we alone in the universe, more compelling, all of these numbers. So exoplanet research in the past 20 years has found out these wonderful facts, that there are lots and lots and lots of other Earths. And so now we can then start asking the question, are we alone? Okay, now if life got started on the, oh geez, I keep doing that. If life got started on these other planets, what did Darwinian evolution do on these other planets? That's a question. Here is what Darwinian evolution did on our planet. This is one of the latest trees, the latest trees of life on Earth. And this is from Hug et al. She's in the Banfield group at Berkeley. Now, you've heard many, many times from Janet that there are 3 domains of life, and I kept on saying, no, they're not, there are 2. No, they're not, there are 2. This is one place where you can see there too. These are all the bacteria here. And here are the archaea. And you can see that the eukaryotes are don't branch here, they don't branch here, they don't branch here, they branch here, well into the tree of archaea, which means that there are some archaea, namely these here, Loki, Thor archaeota, that are more closely related to us than other archaea. The eukaryotes branch in the archaea. Now, there are other complications about this because you can do this based on RNA, or you can do it based on metabolism. We have a lot of bacterial metabolisms, other bacterial genes in us. So some people, like Bill Martin, think that we are a mixture of a lot of this stuff and a lot of this stuff, and that's certainly true. So he puts bacteria coming over this way, archaea coming in this way, and then here's the eukaryotes. So that view is also true. But this is based on a lot of deep reproductive data, reproductive genes. And so if you want to know how many domains there are, just say there are 2, and here are the archaea that we're most closely related to. Okay, why? So this is what life did during the 4 billion years on Earth. Okay, now I want to tell you about the Planet of the Apes. You guys seen this movie? Okay, good. A lot of people seen the movie. This is Charlton Heston. Here are the apes. Oops, turned it off. So here's Charlton Heston in a cage, and here's an anthropologist, I guess. And here's some type of jailer. And these are essentially very hairy versions of humans. They speak English. And at the end of the movie, Charlton Heston is walking along the beach with his girlfriend and a horse. And he sees the half-buried Statue of Liberty. And what he says is, "You blew it up! Oh, damn you, God damn you all to hell." So he realizes that he has been on Earth the whole time. He thought he was on some other planet in some other part of the universe. But then he sees the half-buried Statue of Liberty, and he realizes that he's on Earth. And based on this movie, I've developed the Planet of the Apes law of astrobiology. And here's Charlie's law of the Planet of the Apes. It's so-called, if you crash land, thank you, Molly, thank you. If you crash land on an unknown planet that has Homo sapiens and horses, you don't need the Statue of Liberty to know that you're on Earth. Now, I'm glad you're laughing, but this is it's this quirkometry. If people are speaking English, you are probably on Earth. There's also corn on this planet. It also has a 24-hour day. It has 20% oxygen, etc. The moon is there. It has the same month. The point is that I guess because we like what we do and think that this is quirkier, I would maintain that the genes of Homo sapiens and horses and 3 species of apes are at least as quirky as this artifact of humanity. So, interestingly, look at this. It says, somewhere in the universe, there must be something better than man. And I'm looking at this and said, He thinks man is the best thing on earth. That's the implication of that statement, right? So I guess I've been pushing back against such human exceptionalism for a long time in this field, and the rest of this lecture is going to do that in the context of trying to figure out whether we should expect human-like intelligent aliens elsewhere, or technological civilizations, that you asked the question. How many technological civilizations should we expect in the universe or in the galaxy? And that's what I'll be talking about here. So the Planet of the Apes fallacy looks something like this. Life is hierarchical. We have humans, we're at the top, we're in control. Here are the apes, dogs, sheep, vertebrates with half a brain, and here are bacteria, worms, fungi, and stupid things. This is the hierarchy that humans put on other life forms. I think it's a very stupid one, but here's what happens. There's an intelligence niche. This is the generalization of this idea that we're the best. There's an intelligence niche towards which some species evolve. In other words, humans are on the stage, and off the stage behind the curtains are the chimpanzees, and if we ever stumble and forget our lines, then the chimps are going to come on the stage and fill this intelligence niche. Now the question is there such thing as an intelligence niche? So here we are, World War III. You could add World War IV, 5, 6, 7, 8, how many world wars you think we need to marginalize ourselves. We fall out of this intelligence niche or kill ourselves somehow, and then the chimpanzees or the orangutans or the gorillas or something fills the intelligence niche. That's the idea. This is an idea that's been promulgated most notably by Carl Sagan for the past, during his lifetime. So the idea is called Stupid Things Get Smarter Model of Animal Evolution. That's basically what the idea we have. Or, now here's an interesting thing. I call this diagram the Schwarzeneggerization of life. You start here, obviously look at it, you start out with life, and what's the purpose of life? Zip, to go to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And notice that the plants, they're kind of like marginalized over here. Here are the other animals, and fungi don't even show up in this diagram. This is the type of diagram that I think promotes the stupidity of people's understanding of what evolution is about. So let's describe the Planet of the Apes fallacy. I should call it the Planet of the Apes hypothesis to give it a little bit more respect. But here it is. There is a human-like intelligence niche. There is selection pressure on other species to occupy this niche. On Earth, without humans, or on other planets, some species will evolve into that niche and develop technology. That's the idea. Carl Sagan has called the occupants of this niche the functional equivalent of humans. Carl Sagan thought that there were the functional equivalent of aliens out there. They inhabited this intelligence niche, and there's selection pressure to evolve into this niche. In other words, he said, all things being equal, it's better to be smarter than stupid. That's the idea. So I go around the world asking people questions like, is human-like intelligence a convergent feature of evolution? Should we expect it elsewhere? Is there universal selection pressure for our type of intelligence? When you ask biologists this, typically they'll say no. There are a few exceptions, like Simon Conway Morris, but typically they'll say no, there's no convergent feature of that. The evolution of human-like intelligence is so quirky, we should not expect it elsewhere. However, when you ask physicists and Hollywood, they will say yes. They say, yes, our brains are so big and so important, and I'm so good because I'm so smart, then yes, it's a selection pressure for my type of brain. And you can see that here, big brains and big brains and big brains. So there we have a divergence of opinion. Now, SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And the motivation for SETI is that there is this niche, and evolution has produced things to evolve into this niche and produce radio telescopes, because only then would SETI have a chance of success. For SETI to have success, there has to be a radio telescope on these other planets. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for electrical engineers elsewhere in the universe who know how to build that. And that's what the search for extraterrestrial, it's really not for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, it's a search for extraterrestrial electrical engineers and telescopes. as an operational definition. Now, Frank Drake, I think he just died recently. He was a radio astronomer, and here he is having written the Drake equation, which we saw in Hervé's talk. And I was lucky enough to go to there's a society called the International Society for the Study of the Origin of Life, ISSOL, ISSOL, the International Society for the Study of the Origin of Life. And I had just heard about this society, and I had been teaching this course called Are We Alone? And I was on my way to a meeting. And the meeting was in Oaxaca. And in Mexico City, I got on an airplane to go to Oaxaca, and I got to sit next to Frank Drake, who I'd been talking about his equation. And I said, oh boy, now I get to talk to Frank. Let me ask him some questions. And I said to Frank, why do you think there are intelligent aliens who have built radio telescopes? I know he's a physicist, so he's not much of a biologist, but he has reasons to believe that there are other radio telescopes. And I said, to be more specific, what do you think is the strongest evidence for the idea that human-like intelligence is a convergent feature of evolution? Let me say that again. What do you think is the strongest evidence for the idea that human-like intelligence is a convergent feature of evolution? That's an important question, and so that's what I asked Frank. And almost without hesitation, Frank said, read Harry Jerrison. And I had never heard of Harry Jerrison. Who is Harry Jerrison? So I looked up Harry Jerrison and started reading what he had written. Now, Harry Jerrison is a paleoneurologist, or he goes around looking at the skulls of fossils, seeing how big their brains are, making estimates for how big their body is, taking a ratio of brain to body, and he essentially coined the term encephalization quotient, EQ. How big is your brain compared to your body? We want to do that because humans do not have the biggest brains. Whale brains are like maybe 4 times as big as ours. Elephant brains are bigger. So the encephalization quotient is where we come through as something outstanding. Anyway, I read Harry Jerrison, and the take-home plot from Harry Jerrison is this, 1991. Here's today. Oh, shoot. Here's today. Here's 50 million, 100 million years ago, 200 million years ago. So we have a plot of 200 million years on the x-axis. On the y-axis we have EQ, encephalization quotient. Like I said, essentially taking your brain size, dividing it by your body size. And here we are up here. And here's some average fish, reptiles, and rodents, and some apes here, etc. So this is supposedly evidence for the increase of encephalization quotient on some universal, in some universal general way. Now, I said this sketch is not evidence for a general trend toward increasing EQ. And you say, Charlie, why not? Why isn't this good evidence for a general trend of increasing EQ? Well, here's my counterexample. Imagine if you're an elephant and you look around and you say, oh, I know I'm the best species around here, but what makes me so good? My skin is kind of thick, but rhinoceros skin maybe is thick. What else? Oh, I'm kind of big, but there are other things that are bigger, maybe a whale. But nasalization quotient, the length of my nose compared to the length of my body, the NQ. So you've identified something that you have the biggest of, and then you make a plot. So watch, here's the plot. So here's today. You have identified a y-axis that you are right here. And of course, that means there's a bias in the past of things getting bigger and bigger in your ancestry. Why? Because you've chosen the feature which you get to be put up here. The same thing that went on with the EQ. This is not some type of objective selection of a characteristic of a species. This is something that you have identified as your best in the same way that the elephant has identified NQ that puts the elephant here. So this sketch is not evidence for a trend towards increasing NQ because we have chosen the y-axis so that the species of interest is by definition in the upper right. Anybody want to complain about that? Gustav. Mike.
If you're looking for life, intelligence and telescopes will help you more than big noses.
If you're looking for life, intelligence, unless you want to smell life, right? Okay, so how long did it take us? By the way, elephants have more. Our olfactory lobes, you know, we're proud of our brains, but if you compare our olfactory lobes to the olfactory lobes of almost any of our ancestors, ours are tiny, tiny, tiny. In other words, our ability to sense smell is just terribly reduced. If any of you have a dog, you know that your dog enjoys the world of olfaction everywhere, and you can't smell a goddamn thing, right? So this dog lives in a world that's rich, rich in smells, and you are completely oblivious to it. Much the way that we live in a world of physics that the dog is completely oblivious to. Anyway, but the elephant, by the way, as far as I know, when they look at elephant, the olfactory receptors, they have even many more than dogs. So elephants have an incredible olfactory life, but I'm not an elephant, so I can't say more than that. So how long did it take us to get such big brains that we're proud of? Well, we can figure that out. Here is time. Here's today, here's 1 million years ago, 2 million, 3 million years ago, 3 million to today. Here is cranial capacity, and here are our fossil ancestors. And you can see it took about 2 or 3 million years to go from 400 to about 1400 or so. So our brain case went from about this big to the size it is in about 2 to 3 million years. So that is the time scale of interest in our history. Now I want to talk about plate tectonics. The history of plate tectonics shows that the Earth has not been just one experiment in what evolution will do. Usually we say, oh, this is what the Earth produced. But as far as landlocked vertebrates is concerned, the Earth in the past 200 million years has been more than just one experiment. We are now in South America. South America was isolated for about 100 million years. It was just floating in the Atlantic Ocean, floating away from Africa. It was only about 3 million years ago that it joined into North America and became part of the New World. So South America itself is a wonderful experiment in what evolution does over 100 million year time period. I remind you, 2 to 3 million years is the time period which went from that we became human in terms of our encephalization quotient. So here's today. See that this is South America here. We are right here in Rio. Look at how we're by ourselves here. And here's 120 million years ago when we divided off from Gondwana. So this is a long time to float around in an ocean as an island, not contacted by other landlocked creatures. But you can also see that Madagascar is in the same situation, India, Australia, New Zealand. These also are independent experiments in what biological evolution will do over 50, 80, 100, even 150 million years. These are experiments in evolution that have already been run, whose results we can just read off the record, read off of what has been produced there. So South America and half a dozen other long-duration experiments in the evolution of terrestrial vertebrates have already tested the planet of the apes hypothesis. The experiment was done naturally, and it's already tested this idea. And, well, what are the results? Well, here's a 200 million years to today, and here's kind of a simple diagram of plate tectonics. We had Pangaea here 180 million years ago, divided into Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south. Gondwana divided up here into South America and Africa here. These two divided 110 million years ago or so. Then over here we have Antarctica, Australia, New Zealand, Madagascar, and India. The lines that go vertical are times in which those independent experiments were doing their thing. And just to scale, that is 2 to 3 million years on this scale. You can see there are many intervals, 20 to 50 intervals of 2 to 3 million years during the time frame in which South America was by itself, or Madagascar, or Australia, or New Zealand. Now I guess before I go on further and show you, you could say that these independent islands are 6 independent experiments, but there's a very important way in which you can say, no, it's not just 6. Every single sexually isolated species is an independent experiment in whether you will or will not produce something to inherit this intelligence niche. You don't need to be in an independent continent as long as you're reproductively isolated from other species. So, how many species of mammals are there in South America? Do you happen to know that? About 2,000. So, here during 100 million years, this is not just one experiment in South America. I would say it's maybe 2,000 experiments in whether anything would evolve to fill this intelligence niche. And the same goes for Madagascar, Australia, and New Zealand. So, this is a book that you might want to read if you live in South America, because it talks about the splendid isolation and what evolved in South America during this isolation of South America by George Gaylord Simpson. Also, here's Jared Diamond. He's the author of The World Until Yesterday and Collapse, and he said, New Zealand is as close as we will get to the opportunity to study life on another planet. Why? Because New Zealand is just like in the middle of nowhere. It's a pretty big place in the middle of nowhere. It's pretty isolated. And so, hey, that's kind of like a planet elsewhere. And here he's getting congratulated for why sex is fun, I think, from Clinton. Okay. But you can ask the question, what filled the intelligence niche during New Zealand's 100 million years of independence? You ask the question, what filled the intelligence niche? If there is this selection pressure towards this human-like intelligence niche, what filled it in New Zealand? Plenty of time. And here are the 2 candidates, a tuatara or a kiwi. What filled it in Australia? Well, kangaroo, a koala, you know, see if you can come up with something that's closer to human-like intelligence. South America. Madagascar, and India. So here we put in what you might guess as the closest thing to human-like intelligence that evolved during these 50 to 100 million years on these independent experiments. And most people would look at these other creatures and say, no, they're not filling the human-like intelligence niche. They're not building telescopes. They don't qualify. And there again is the 2 to 3 billion years. So each of these continents, with their millions of lineages, has had 30 to 50 times longer to get smart than our lineage needed. And I suggest that this is the best evidence we have to answer the question whether there is some universal selection pressure to push species to get smarter in the way that we define smartness as technological intelligence. So here's an objection to this idea. Some of you are skeptical. One of the most common objection I've heard to this is, we don't see other occupants of this intelligence niche because we are the first, and we have suppressed or killed the other species that were evolving into this intelligence niche. This is a little like Darwin's argument about why we don't see the origin of life anymore, because current life eats up the proto-life before it can get anywhere. So our existence is supposed to suppress the evolution of these other things that are trying to get smart, but we just kill them before they do. The problem with that is humans weren't even on these other continents and islands until 1,000 or 60,000 years ago. Therefore, we could not have suppressed them until very recently. Therefore, according to the Planet of the Apes hypothesis, we should see evidence for evolution towards human-like intelligence. We could not have suppressed the evolution of human-like intelligence here because we were not there. Matter of fact, we weren't even anywhere until about 2 to 3 million years ago. And there it was in Africa, not here. The monkeys in South America were not at all influenced by humans until humans got here, 10,000 or 30,000 years ago. Notice that 10 or 30,000 years ago is a lot smaller than 500,000. So that's a long time to evolve and be selected. Hey, if you're going to be selected for smarts, it should have happened already. It hasn't. So that was one objection. Another objection, well, they say, Because we are the first, it says. I've heard this many, many times. We are the first. And the implication is, oh, somebody has to be first. But no, someone does not have to be the first sulfur-crested cockatoo, or the first Indian elephant, or the first human-like intelligence. Species are not inevitable. By saying someone has got to be the first, you are assuming what you're trying to prove. That's why that objection doesn't hold water. I'll stop here for a second. Is anybody convinced by my polemic here? I know that the woman sitting next to you doesn't like this. Okay, anyway, so let me go on. I think I don't have that many more slides. So I think humans are unique, just like every other species. Now I say this because when I say humans are unique, everybody says, oh yes, yes, you're right, yeah, sure. But then I say, just like every other species, and they say, oh, that spoils, that kind of ruins the party, Charlie. I maintain humans are unique just like every other species on Earth. It makes no sense at all to concoct an imaginary set of, the imaginary set is this set of intelligent, what Carl Sagan say? Functional equivalent humans. This is the imaginary set that Carl Sagan has concocted based on the idea that there is general selection pressure towards human-like intelligence that can build telescopes. So, it makes no sense to concoct an imaginary set. By the way, I love Carl Sagan. I mean, I'm a cosmologist because of Carl Sagan, but this is something that he said that I just disagree completely with. It makes no sense. Now, if you know me, I disagree with a lot of people, so that shouldn't surprise you. It makes no sense to concoct an imaginary set of which we are the only terrestrial member. Remember, we have excluded the other life forms from this wonderful set called intelligence. That's what we've done when we say, when we ask the question, are we humans alone, we have automatically excluded all the life forms on Earth. But every biologist knows we are not alone on Earth. But physicists, in their non-biological ignorance, say, oh, are we humans alone in the universe? Completely ignoring the rest of life on Earth. So it's a really, really stupid question, but half the population of the Earth asked this question as if it made sense because of their belief in human exceptionalism, human uniqueness, forgetting the fact that all other species are unique too. So,
I want to ask a question.
Go. This is my wife, Molly.
I've heard this talk before, but I wanted to make it clear that you don't think that monkeys and sulfur-crested cockatoos and all the other animals are stupid.
No.
You think they have intelligence.
Right.
It's just not the kind of intelligence that builds radio telescopes.
Right.
So there is pressure for animals to be intelligent to live, intelligent enough to live, but not to build radio telescopes.
Yeah, that's basically...
Because koalas don't need a radio telescope.
Right. So, in other words, I would say that other creatures, if they have intelligence, have the type of intelligence that has enabled their ancestors to be alive and give birth to their descendants. That's intelligence. That's what I would call intelligence. That's the definition of it. Intelligence is not 2 + 2 = something, or being able to do calculus. Your brain is there. It has been selected to keep your ancestors alive, and that's why you're here. So, as Molly said, I don't think that other creatures don't have intelligence, just have their own specific, they have a unique intelligence just like we do. But we somehow think our intelligence is so much better than theirs that it's generic that we should find it elsewhere. But we think that a sulfur-crested cockatoo's intelligence is not so generic and we shouldn't find it elsewhere. Only our own is so good that it's generic and therefore we should search for it elsewhere. That's more or less the human exceptionalism that goes into these SETI arguments. When I talk to SETI groups, and I've presented this several times to SETI groups, they really don't like it. Frank Drake almost, he was very angry and depressed to the degree that he thought this argument made sense. So, let's see. So it makes no sense to concoct an imaginary set of which we are the only terrestrial members, and then suppose that biological evolution elsewhere in the universe evolves towards this set. I think that our closest relatives, genetically, morphologically, phenotypically, any way you want, are here on this earth. They're not going to be found elsewhere. But Carl Sagan thinks otherwise. He thinks there are functional equivalent humans. As a matter of fact, if you've watched television, you watch Superman, you know who Superman is, right? Superman evolved on another planet. And he came to Earth, he evolved on Krypton. So we have a Homo sapien that evolved on another planet, came to Earth, and he's able to have sex with, who does he have sex with? Lois Lane, right? Lois Lane. As a matter of fact, in some of the subsequent comics, they have children, Lois. So here we have a Homo sapien that has evolved on another planet. You think, oh, that's a kind of a crazy exception. No, it's not. What about Mr. Spock in Star Trek? His father was a Vulcan, his mother was from Earth. You have another two Homo sapiens evolved. Well, I say they're in the same species because they were able to have sex and have Mr. Spock. This is something that's deeply embedded in our conception of the generality of being a human. It's so good to be human that any planet worth its salt will evolve a Homo sapien and their radio telescopes, and we'll be able to contact them. That is the ridiculous assumption behind so much of this alien talk. Okay. So this concoction, this imaginary set, is called the Planet of the Apes hypothesis. It is testable. Paleoneurology, the stuff that Harry Jerison did, does not support it for the reason I showed there with that EQ plot. And South America and half a dozen multi-million-year experiments in vertebrate evolution are the best data we have to test it. Vanity and the belief in your own human exceptionalism is not scientific data. I'm talking about data that can evaluate this. This suggests that there's no generic group of functionally equivalent humans in the universe, and this can explain the great silence. The great silence is the Fermi paradox. Basically, Fermi is a physicist. He thinks that, he knows that there are lots and lots of other planets in the universe. He knows the age of the galaxy. He knows how long it takes to get from one part of the galaxy to another. And he says, and then he makes the assumption that on these planets you have life. If you have life, you have evolution towards functionally equivalent humans who build radio telescopes and rocket ships. And then, with all those assumptions, then you have a paradox. Where are they? That's Fermi's paradox. And this answers that paradox and says, essentially, your assumptions are wrong. Human-like intelligence is not a generic, convergent feature of evolution. And here's a kicker, yet I support SETI. Because when we have the technology to cheaply explore new parameter space, we should do it. I think null results are important. The universe may be stranger than we can imagine, and I may be wrong about the Planet of the Apes hypothesis. Now, when Hervé was giving his talk, he was saying that, we should be accurate in the way that we describe what we do. But I was thinking of Christopher Columbus and all the descendants of Europeans in this room. And Christopher Columbus went to the court of Isabel, and who was the king? King Isabel, and who was her husband? Yeah, that was he was the king of Aragon, but what was his name? Alfonso or Philip. Anyway, Christopher Columbus went to see Isabel, and he presented calculations about the size of the earth that the experts in the court of Spain at the time knew were wrong by about a factor of 2. They knew approximately how big the earth was, and they said to Isabel, don't give this guy money, his calculations are all wrong, don't do it. Because we scientists who know better know that this is kind of a phony kind of propaganda press release that Christopher Columbus is trying to sell to Isabella. And I guess she didn't pay attention to the scientists, and she paid attention to Christopher, gave him the money, and here we all sit because of this wonderful press release that was mistaken. So because of his mistake and because of his optimism and his exaggeration of his abilities, he discovered the New World for Europe. So I guess what's the lesson of there is I guess it's okay to make mistakes sometimes, I guess, is one lesson. And I think this is my last slide. Oh, well, no, I just wanted to repeat. Are we humans alone in the universe? And the answer to that is, of course not. Look, there are trees right there. So obviously we're not alone. That's one answer. So humans are not alone on Earth. So some people say, Charlie, what's the answer to the question? Are we alone? Well, if you think we as humans, the answer is obvious, we're not alone. Why? Because there's other life on Earth. Humans are not alone on Earth. See all these other life forms on Earth? We're not alone. Since we're not alone on Earth, and since the Earth is part of the universe, then of course we humans are not alone in the universe. So don't let anybody ask the question, are we humans alone in the universe? That doesn't make any sense. We are not. But how about the question, are we the life forms of Earth alone in the universe? Is this some generic set that we can ask the question in a more legitimate way? And unfortunately, I would say, since we don't know what this set means, I've been deconstructing the word life for a long time now. I think we do not know. We should stop pretending we know what life is, as if we knew where the boundaries of life were and non-life. This is a black and white version of a very complicated group of stuff. And if you're a scientist, you believe that there was non-life, and over here is something we call life, and there's this transition, and if there's a transition, there's nowhere you're going to say, oh, here's the boundary. Here's here's life, and here's non-life. Or over here's the boundary. You're never going to agree on that. It's kind of like going into the history of humanity and saying, okay, when was the first human? It's just a silly question. It doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like you hold your mother's hand, she holds her mother's hand, she holds her mother's hand. This is a Richard Dawkins analogy. She holds her mother's hand. You go back and say, which is the mother that wasn't a human and which was the daughter that was? That's a silly question. This is a transition. And that's the same with anything in biology. That's why I said in a previous lecture, if it has evolved, you can't define it in a way, in a definition that you can be sure can be extrapolated to other planets. And so here are some other life forms. If you're a physicist who believes in a thermodynamic version of life, so if you define life broadly to include convection cells and dust devils, this is a dust devil on Mars, by the way, and hurricanes, then life on Earth is not alone. We know of such far from equilibrium dissipative structures all over the universe. But most biologists will vehemently disagree with this because they'll say, and to some truth to it, these structures don't store energy, well, maybe they store energy, but maybe they don't store information. And so then you have to have an argument about what is information. And does it have to be stored inside a cell, or can you store the information in the architecture around you? That's the basis for believing, some people, that stars are life forms because the information that they produce from one generation to the other is the abundance of elements in the dust around them, which changes the next generation of stars. So, but then you're saying, well, that's not really coded information. No, it's not coded information, but it's architectural information that has been produced by one generation of stars. So almost everything about this business called life, you can ask yourself the question, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And essentially, you end up with a lot of questions. But occasionally, there are facts, like this plate tectonic arguments, that can help guide your intuition about whether you should or should not expect the functional equivalent of humans elsewhere. And here's another thought. Our existence on Earth can tell us little about the probability of life elsewhere in the universe, because even if this probability were infinitesimally small and there were only one life-harboring planet in the universe, we would, of necessity, find ourselves on that planet. This is a little like an anthropic argument. So independent of the probability of life, if it's 10 to the minus a billion, 10 to the minus a trillion, 10 to the minus whatever, our existence here is not sensitive to that because we would be the tiny, tiny, tiny fraction that had life. Now, that also applies, the same reasoning applies to human-like intelligence. So I'm going to rephrase this paragraph. The same logic applies to human-like intelligence. Now, instead of life, I'm just going to replace the word life with human-like intelligence and say, our existence on Earth can tell us little about the probability of the evolution of human-like intelligence in the universe, because even if this probability were infinitesimally small, and there were only one planet with the kind of intelligence that can ask this question, we, the question askers, would, of necessity, find ourselves on that planet. And here's J.B.S. Haldane. I thought I'd end with a quote from him. He said, the universe is not only queerer than we suppose, but queerer than we can suppose. And I can recommend his writings if you're interested in getting an understanding of evolutionary biology. And also, if you're interested in more polemics from me, go to this website, arewealone.us, and I put a lot of effort into making this video-based MOOC course. You don't have to sign up, it's there on YouTube, and just go to that website, and you will see lots and lots and lots of videos that are similar to the one you just heard. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles, for the great lecture. So the lesson from Christopher Columbus is that you need to be a bit exaggerated when talk to grant agents, at least.
He was a factor of 2 exaggerated.
Yeah.
That's not a bit. That's not 10 to 20%. Oh, a biologist has raised his unique arm.
My question is not going to be that unique. Actually, it's more a comment. Well, thank you very much for doing away with this anthropomorphism that
Wait. You think I did away with something? You think
Yes,
these
you
people
did.
are convinced? These are physicists we're talking to.
No, because you saved me a lot of trouble. I was going to say a lot of what you said, but you said it so well that I no longer need to readdress those issues. Because people usually are not very used to seeing us as a result of historicity, as all other species. It's like we are blessed with something that makes us different in our destiny. And this is it's completely wrong. There's nothing special about our particular path. It's just the result of many intangible factors in the course of history, just as with any other species. And intelligence is one of these characteristics. That being said, usually we're a bit, just like the example of the nose you gave us, we are a bit exaggerated in what we consider intelligence. Like many animals on this planet have developed intelligence to a certain degree. Intelligence that actually evolved from lesser kinds of neural connections. For example, cephalopods have in many cases a high intelligence species, some birds, some insects, some fish. So it has occurred many times. It's just that they didn't reach the level of technological civilization that we have. But then, take our own species, go back 100,000 years. Would we be that impressed with our accomplishments 100,000 years ago? No, we would go see this is one more monkey walking around and doing simple things. I mean, we wouldn't be that impressed. Having gone to the moon, the same species, the same brain, everything was the same. So I think when people think about intelligence, they're being extremely exclusivist as to our own particular kind of intelligence at this stage in our culture. Without culture, we're not as impressive in terms of our accomplishments anyway. So I ask you, what are your views on this?
Well, I agree with almost everything you said, except for you said level of intelligence. And the phrase level of intelligence assumes that there's a one-dimensionality to intelligence. And I think that's just inappropriate. I think that every species, I think intelligence is n-dimensional, where
sure,
n is the number of species.
Oh, no, yeah, if I pass that impression, I didn't express myself well. For example, take octopuses. They're very intelligent, but they have 9 brains. 1 brain for each tentacle plus 1 central brain. So certainly they have a sort of intelligence in terms of problem-solving abilities with their environment, which is very, very different from ours. But still we can realize their intelligence in a general sense that we consider ourselves intelligent.
But again, you said the word very intelligent. And I would say that implies that there's a one-dimensionality to it. In my view, you cannot use words like that to describe the type of intelligence there's a worm here. It has, I don't know how many neurons, but it has whatever intelligence it used to stay alive. The octopus, same thing. Humans, same thing. Those beautiful birds, the frigate birds that I see, they have, I wouldn't say I wouldn't use any one-dimensional implication about the word intelligence because of this.
But, I mean, come on. I'm now trying just to compare with our kind of intelligence because that's the focus of the questions. For example, you take a beetle, you put it here, it walks, puff. You put it back here, it walks, puff down, 100 times.
A bill.
A beetle.
A beetle.
Yeah.
Okay.
It will never learn. You don't do that to an octopus.
Well, it didn't have to learn.
But that's what I mean. We're talking about intelligence in the
well,
sense
I would say
that
it
we
is doing the
consider
intelligent thing when it does that. When it doesn't learn, because learning is the type of thing you called learning is not something that was selected for in its past, and it has the type of intelligence that it needs to survive, and that's all you can say about any species.
Yeah, of course. But I'm not talking about this. I'm
Okay.
talking about the specific kind of intelligence that we consider intelligence in our species. And even in that narrower definition, we find other cases in
Right.
different branches of life, creatures which are very different from ourselves,
Right. Yeah.
although they're not technological.
Right. Well, it depends on what you mean by technology, too, right? Bird nests and beaver dams and. whether
There is some technology, but not the level we have. It's just getting there. Yeah, basic technology. There are many.
Well, if I think you would agree with me if our intelligence produces technology that destroys all human beings, that's stupidity and not intelligence.
Okay, yeah, that's a judgment of values. Yeah.
Well,
like for example,
my point, I mean,
Yeah.
intelligence is something that has been selected for to help you survive, and if it doesn't do that, then it's stupid, and it's not intelligent.
No. It helped us survive when we're fighting other groups and other animals.
Right.
It's just that now it no longer serves this purpose. It just ends up destroying everything. Like you mentioned continental drift.
Yes.
In plate tectonics, and indeed the history of South America, I was very impressed that you cited George Gaylord Simpson's book, Wonderful Isolation. That's a marvelous book. And the mammal fauna of South America was fantastic before it got connected to the other continents, to North America. Once it got connected, the more normal mammal fauna gradually obliterated the native and South American fauna until there's almost nothing left. And the last wave of that migration was us. We finished it up. The last remnants of the old South American mammal fauna were wiped out in the past 20,000 years or so. It's very recent. We still have a few, like armadillos and anteaters and sloths, but very few. There's so much more.
Those are the marsupials?
No, marsupials are still here, yeah. Marsupials did not get wiped out. They're tougher.
So can you tell us a little bit, when was the date in which humans came to South America?
Oh, about 20,000 years ago.
Perfect.
Yeah.
About 20,
Yeah.
plus or minus
Some people
10.
say a little more, yeah. There are fossils. Some people say a little older. But I mean, it's not too old. It's like relatively recent.
Okay.
And we wiped out everything. It's amazing.
And soon we'll wipe out ourselves.
Yeah. We continue this trend. So we'll be alone. If we feel alone now, we'll feel a lot more alone in a few decades.
So you're saying when we're dead, we're alone. That's an interesting perspective.
Okay, Charles.
Yes.
If you see, when we talked about this before, I never used the word intelligence because I agree with you with all of this. Intelligence, I don't think that is the thing that distinguish us from the other life on Earth, right? That's why I started to talk to you about other things.
So you think that there is something about humans that distinguishes us from other life
I
forms?
think so, but
And
that's another conversation. No, I'm not starting that. The
Okay.
psyches Janet brought, but I was not here yesterday, before
Okay.
yesterday. So, but I think there is something that distinguishes, but no, it's not intelligence. If you see, I never used the word intelligence because I agree with you in all of this.
Oh, good. Then why are you asking?
No, I'm not asking. I'm just
I bet we can find lots to disagree with about this.
yes, no. If I talked here about what we were discussing, it will be a discussion till tomorrow. So, but Gustavo has something to say.
Well, I should say, just this is a very important issue because most people are not interested in finding bacteria on Mars. They could care less. If somebody finds bacteria on Mars, biologists will be happy, but most people say, well, can I talk to it? They're not interested in finding things that you'd have to look at a microscope or study chemically. They're interested in other intelligent life forms. That's why this analysis and this debate and this discussion is so important. Whether we should or should not expect the functional equivalent of Homo sapiens, because that's what people want to find, because that's what they see in the Hollywood movies.
Okay, it's just a remark. I think we may say that the one objective thing
Of
that
who?
the one objective thing that evolution selects for is survival, the capacity to endure. And in the very long term, apart from, say, photopanspermia or the carrying of bacteria to other planets, in the very long term, in technological intelligence will save us, might save us from the evolution of the sun and the destruction of the planet. So that might be value in that.
Okay, so here's my objection to that idea. My objection to that idea is you are not one species. If we send humans to the moon, we will be sending probably thousands of species of bacteria. And you can say, oh, well, just get rid of the bacteria. The bacteria are not responsible for getting us to the moon. I would say, yes, they are. You can't, in other words, and people who study the microbiome of your stomach, they say, okay, this biology, bacteria are bad, so let's wipe out all the bacteria in your stomach, and then they find out, uh-oh, I did something, I made you sicker. So the idea of humans doing anything as an individual species that's not very, very dependent on other species is a no-starter for me. And so that's why I would object to the, hey, here's a good thing about humans, we can do this. Another objection is that bacteria probably have already gotten to the moon already in the first billion years because there was a bombardment, bacteria stayed alive, and then they landed on the moon. And then, I don't know, they probably didn't figure out how to make oxygen there in sufficient quantities to stay alive, but they got there before we did. Similarly, humans invented agriculture. 50 million years ago, there were ants who were doing agriculture, farming fungi, and also farming other plants. So the idea that humans could do anything better or first continues to be undermined the more we find out about what other species are doing. But if you ignore completely other species and just say, I know we're unique, how are we special? If you just ask the question, how are we, I've heard that question asked hundreds of times, how are we special? Not are we special or are we different, but how are we different? You're already assuming what you're pretending to find out evidence for or against. And that happens again and again and again. And it's just, it's not science anymore. It's religious human exceptionalism that should be squeezed out of astrobiology to help us make progress.
Yes, I think that's the point. For me also, it's not that what we do or what we are is special. It's just different. But it's so important to us than it is for the beetle to learn or not to learn what it has to learn. So I agree with you. It's not the unique, the special thing. I think it's just different in all ways. But I'm a psychologist, so I'm always agreeing with everybody.
It's a quick question, Renato. Yeah.
Wait, microphone coming, microphone coming.
Just a fast question. By the way, amazing, very amazing talk. Sorry for yelling at you. So you can estimate then numerically if the electric engineers are alone in the universe.
You mean human electrical engineers?
Yeah, yes. So my question to you is, have people given the number of species that are alive in the frequentist way, for example, today, 10 million species, 10 to the 7, so let's assume that overall 10 to the 9, 10 to the 10. Does this solve the Fermi paradox? I think you may have.
No, here's why. Here's a thought experiment that'll maybe help you with this. One of the objections that I've heard about this argument I've given is that, okay, how many independent continents were there? Okay, maybe half a dozen, let's say 10. And they say, well, humans evolved on one of these continents. Therefore, the probability of humans is 1 out of 10. All right? Now, that's more or less an argument you can make. But the problem with that is, here's a counterexample. Here's the problem. Imagine there were, I don't know, 1 billion, 1 trillion, I don't know, ping pong balls in a lottery. And you, out of this billion, trillion, an infinite number, you pick, I don't know, 4. And one of those is you, right? You're one of them. And then you see these other 3, and you say, the probability of me being picked was 1 out of 4. Obviously, that's crazy. That makes no sense, because you're reducing the set that you're considering to the ones that have been produced here. That's the argument, the logic of, or my objection to that argument.
Okay, so let's keep the other questions for the discussion section. Okay, if you have questions, you can send this question by mail to me. Okay, because then later I send it to Renato, that to be the chair of the discussion section. Okay, so Dr. Charles Lineweaver, thank you so much for your very, very great talk, and also very great course. Okay, thank you so much.
Well.